and I'm going to continue with how I should have done with Scotty at the Players.
I bet Sam Burns last week. What a loser.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy right now to get yourself a deposit match of up to $100. And if you're looking for the Pat Mayo Experience Listeners League, it is now on Underdog. It'll be released on the main draft page under PGA for the Valspar Championship. It will be a draft once the tee times are released. That is the trigger when the tournament gets created. It is rake free. Let's fill this one up as quickly as possible. It's pretty small to start because they want to gauge the interest that the fans have in a rake free draft league for Thursday only. I, for one, am excited. I am going to be in those streets doing the draft. So hopefully you're going to come join me. I believe it's 10 max, so you can really pound out some Valspar Championship drafts. All right, and use fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself 20% off. Best bet show for the Valspar Championship. Brad Thomas, Joe Idone, the panel this week. I had a very bad Players Championship, but both you guys were on location at various points, so that sounds like a big win regardless of how the bets did. How was it, Joe, your first time covering an event for Rotoballer and the Preferred Lines podcast?
Yeah, it was amazing, Pat. An experience like I've probably never had before. That tournament is awesome. There is not a blade of grass on place on property. It was so cool because I've been to the other Florida tournaments, including the Valspar before, and just the way that they sort of build the stadium aspect and the mounding around the greens, there isn't like a bad place to stand on the entire property. We finally got that great finish we've been eager for all year, even though it was painful for me with a giant Brian Harmon ticket and a Wyndham Clark live ad. But you got to tip your hat to Scotty Scheffler, who shoots a Sunday 64, dealing with a stinger in the neck or something. Who knows what it was, but it was an awesome tournament. Great experience. Really cool to be there.
NBC Sports, Brad Thomas, you too. You said you were there on Tuesday?
Yeah, I was out there on Tuesday. I was supposed to go on Saturday. And then, of course, the wife changes plans, but Tuesday was work. And like Joe said, that course is immaculate, tip-top shape. I don't know if Joe saw this, but what I love about going to TPC during the week is how many guys they have mowing the lawn. It's like an army of 300 dudes mowing the lawn, one line at a time. It's always beautiful. And yeah, of course, 17 is my favorite spot to post up. Even on a Tuesday, the little hill they have is packed with people.
Have you been to Innisbrook, the Copperhead course at Valspar, or is it just Joe who's been there, Brad?
I've been there, and I've played in a tournament at the course. Oh, humbling. Very humbling. I was just hacking it up all over the place.
Yeah, well, what are your impressions of it, Joe? Because I don't want this to turn into an easy course. Like, if we can get another -10 winner, I'm going to be very happy.
Yeah, my impressions of it are much like Brad, that it's a very difficult course. That said, Pat, it seems like the tour has brought in a new system of sort of making these tournaments easier. Like you had just previously mentioned, they neutered the bear trap at my favorite course at the Honda Classic or the Cognizant Classic a few weeks ago. They added and made the Players Championship, I felt like, played a little bit easier. Like they kept that little rough bumper around the green on 17, which was a little bit controversial in the media room there, to allow those balls to stop and not traditionally would just run into the water. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any significant changes in the setup this week. I hope not. I love this tournament. I think it's great prep for major championship season. I think it's great viewing on television and typically gives us a pretty solid leaderboard and some drama down the stretch.
Brad, let me ask you this, because I wrote about this in my newsletter column this week. You can go hit it right now. It's completely free. Substack, Mayo Media, or just hit the description. It's down there, and you can take a read of it. They'll never have a PGA Championship or a U.S. Open in Florida. It would just be too fucking hot the entire time. But how good would this course be as a U.S. Open?
Oh my God, this course would be perfect, especially since like we know they've made the rough a lot more thick or thicker. But if they continue to thicken out the rough, it's tree lined, so it's already difficult. They're cutting the greens in, so there's not that runoff area that's going to be on these greens around the collar. This would be absolutely beautiful, and I'd probably be the first person in attendance. But like Joe said, like I hope they don't make this course easy. We've got a ton of rain here in Florida in the Orlando, Tampa area, and if they just let that rough go, it could get really difficult for missing fairways.
But they're not going to do that. You know it's not going to happen. They'll cut it down and make it a little bit easier. That's no fun. So, any takeaways, Joe, that you had from just seeing the players out there that obviously you could watch any player that you wanted. It is impossible to watch them all at the same time. Just, I've listened. Obviously, Wyndham Clark played really well. So did Scotty Scheffler. But were there guys that you saw around the course like they're actually playing a lot better than like the scorecard might tell us here?
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting being there, Pat, on site, and you've kind of know this from doing it before, is like getting a glimpse of how guys warm up on the range. The guys who stay after their round and sort of practice late, and or you can tell the guys who are frustrated and working on things with their coaches. Also, the interaction between like player caddy walking, right? There are some guys who show visible frustration and are like there's something that they don't have figured out in their golf swing, and they're actively working on it with their caddy as they move about through the course. So you pick up little things and ins and outs sort of like that. Obviously I followed a lot of the bigger groups through most of it and kind of sort of weave my way through the crowds. Wyndham Clark was incredible. Brian Harmon I was with was absolutely striping it the entire day. But yeah, you get a different sense sort of being on site of not just seeing the players stand over the ball and how they're sort of moving and what their energy is like in between shots and pre and post round. That's kind of unique.
So was there anyone who actually stood out to you that maybe we're not thinking about?
I would say not. The one guy that I really like this week that I think a lot of people will is Jimmy Stanger. Look, like I wanted to see him. He was super excited to be there, which I like to see. He had a great energy about him, whether he had good shots or bad shots. He's fist pumping all the fans in and out. He was working hard pre and post round. Xander, the amount of work that he was putting in with Chris Como on the course really sort of stuck out to me, and he's made some significant changes to not only his swing, but I think his attitude. And just listening to Xander in post round pressers, where I had felt that this weight of not winning and being, breaking through for victory had really been weighing on him. I don't really get that sense anymore. And he seems to be in a really good spot mentally. And I think part of that is working with Como and sort of how he reinforces what a good player he is. But little things like that. Justin Thomas was there a ton working with his dad and Bones. He was one of the first players out before the second wave of afternoon tee times. Obviously, things did not go his way at the Players' Championship, but another player who's actively working hard and is one of the top guys on the board this week.
Brad, I feel like this is in your wheelhouse, so I'm going to ask you. They changed the green types at the Players' Championships officially to POA Overseed from Bermuda. They've done the same thing this week at Innisbrook. Can you tell us the difference between that and why that might be important, or whether it is important or not?
Yeah, I think it's very important, right? So POA's a much more difficult green to putt on. Bermuda's nice, firm, smooth, true roll. I'm a Florida golfer, and I'll tell you this first and foremost. When you play on Bermuda greens and you putt on Bermuda greens, you just get used to them because I feel like every putt you're going to have is just going to roll true. That's not going to happen on POA greens. And a lot of these guys, like the Sam Burns of the world, which kind of scares me at his price of 12-1, by the way, but the Sam Burns of the world who are just, talked about of being these great Bermuda putters, you're gonna kind of forget. You're gonna see he might get frustrated on these greens a little bit because they're not going to roll as true. It's not going to be, in my opinion, as pretty, as beautiful, but probably won't get as baked out either. I haven't checked the latest forecast, but I mean, you guys know Florida and these Bermuda greens can get baked out real fast and it plays really difficult. So I wish they stuck with the Bermuda here, but just kind of change the way you build your modeling around, because I know that a lot of people are just going to go heavy Bermuda, and they did it last week. They do it the week before, anytime you're on the Florida swing, but that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah, did that ever come up when you were walking around last week, Joe, or was it just like, yeah, whatever, it's basically the same?
No, it didn't really come up. I mean, I didn't hear any players talk about it. The fans, I think, it's funny being there, and we're in such a we're in such a we're in this circle of golf Twitter where we're so deep in the weeds with analytics and stuff like that. And it's interesting to just be amongst very casual fans in an element like that. You could probably speak to this too, Brad, but just hearing them talk, like one of the things I really picked up on was what still the level of superstar that Jordan Spieth is, right? We don't really get the sense because he's not playing great and hasn't won in a while. But when you're following that group, it's everything you hear around me is Spieth's group is up next. Where's Spieth at? Is Spieth coming up in this following group when I'm standing up by the green? And he's playing with Rory McIlroy and Victor Hovland, like two top four players in the world. Yet the majority, 80 to 90% of the people there are there to see Jordan Spieth. It is Spieth's group. So little things like that you sort of pick up on that sometimes we get lost in the circles that we run in on golf Twitter and forget that the casual fan is very much oblivious to some of the ins and outs weekly in the golf world and things like grass types and these other elements that play a factor in these tournaments when you're trying to sort of handicap them or look at them from a DFS perspective.
All right, let's move in to the gold picks. Want to remind everyone, Thursday night is the night on the Pat Mayo Experience live on Mayo Media Network, the Custies live debate. Cust will be on in studio live, Jeff will be on the line live, and if you do have a question for either of them, hit the description right now, and there is a flip page that we have where you can record a 20-second video. The best ones will be shown to them for the first time ever, brand new to them, live on air as we prep for the town hall debate. So please be there, share it around, and get people jazzed for the Custies debate, because the Custies voting closes not immediately after, but just you have that, then you have the weekend to decide for the most important election, I think, in 2024. Who is the most insane person? Cust? Or is it Jeff? Or is it me or Paul? We're on the ballot too, but we're not getting a lot of traction here. We're like the RFK, although we're actually on the ballot everywhere. But either way, gold picks for the Valspar Championship. I am going to take a guy that I made fun of Jeff about betting, because Jeff bets him outright every single week, and dude's never won. But when you look at his play at more difficult courses, Cam Young actually kind of elevates his game a little bit. Even his around the green work tends to be a little bit better once it gets a bit more difficult to chip. But his driving was not on point, clearly, at the Players' Championship, and it really wasn't at Bay Hill either, but the approach game just continues to be absolute fire. But the biggest thing that's been holding him back the past 2 weeks, he's dropped like 10 combined total strokes on the green, yet he continues to make the weekend. He continues to generate birdies over and over, so hopefully he can just even out that putter a little bit. I like Cam Young here, Brad. Top 20 at plus 150. Something just very easy for him to do. He can have a bad week and still come 14th.
Yeah, no, Cam Young's funny because I think that I'm actively trying to find the spot where Cam Young breaks through. Like every time I look at his stat profile, I'm trying to make this big grandiose case for him, but a top 20 ticket is something that I think is more likely to happen this week than it was last week. Why? Because his driver was struggling, but when you come to Innisbrook, you play this Copperhead course, you're going to have so many forced layups here where if you're spraying your driver and it's not going exactly where you want, that's okay because you're probably going to hit in 3-wood. You're going to be hitting iron off the tee a lot more times than not. And if you're absolutely striping your irons, this is when you're going to get hot. Now, I don't know if he's going to win, but I'm kind of actually shocked about that price of plus 150. Weaker field. I think his price last week was kind of rivaled that, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's just people turn on Cam Young, Joe, so quickly. It's like, oh my God, he's definitely going to win. Let's price him at 16 to 1 to win the tournament. Yes. And then he has 2 bad weeks. It's like, this guy fucking sucks.
Yep. Absolutely. Nobody moves up and down the odds board spiral quite like Cam Young, but I like your take there. You're right. If this course, I think the harder this course plays, Pat, the more it falls into Cam Young's sort of lap. For top 8 finishes in major championships. So he's been a player that enjoys difficult conditions. Played pretty well thus far in the Florida Swing, has played good at the Cognizant multiple years. He's played good at the API multiple years. You're right. It comes down to ultimately the putter with him, but the last month or so, his approach play has sort of really been locked in. And you talked about it briefly there, Brad, too. Like you're looking at a place for a player to break through. It's where we saw Gary Woodland get his first win, Sam Burns, Taylor Moore last year, Adam Hadwin. We've seen a lot of players break through. Paul Casey had a huge drought before before he finally won here. So it's a spot where we've seen these guys take advantage of this dip course and their current form and be able to parlay that into an initial victory and get off the schneid. So good luck with Cam Young this week. I think it's a good number.
Yeah, I'm not betting him to win, just top 20 plus 150, and that includes the ties. If you really want to get risky, you could probably boost that number up a little bit, but then you might have to chop it. I don't want to be doing that. Brad, your gold pick.
Whew, my gold pick. I went with Doug Gim, top 20 at plus 230. I'm fully capable, fully expecting this to get dead heated out because I wanted the bigger number. When we look at Doug Gim, like I feel like it's been kind of quiet that he's put together 4 really good tournaments, 4 straight top 20 finishes, the Players, Cognizant, Mexico Open, the Phoenix Open, and his number's not really changing. Maybe he was a kind of a popular pick last week, even in his outright number, but he kind of got a little bit more respect after the Open. He opened around 80-1 to win the whole tournament. I think I bet it at 70 and the number dropped to 50. But his top 20 finish for me, what I like about it is he lost strokes putting at Mexico Open. Granted, it was only minus 0.1, but he's been a gainer in four of the 5 events that he played in. And much like Cam Young, his approach play has been absolutely dynamite. When you look at players like a Doug Gim, these guys' profiles who, not winners, right? On tour, you want guys who are just coming in flaming hot. Guys who are coming in flaming hot who kind of fit the mold. If I were to be afraid of somewhere with Doug Gim, it might be par 3 scoring, right? Like could be better. But at 70-1 to win and plus 230 as a top 20 guy who's a great long iron player, great ball striker, and coming in really hot. I thought that price was just outrageous.
Well, I think the market kind of caught up with you on that as well. I'm looking at Bet365 right now. Doug Gim 40-1 to win this tournament now.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so he's getting a ton of steam. I understand it completely. Like, it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I love the Gim Reaper. He's my guy. Yep. But 40-1, Joe, to out like 70-1, yes. 40-1 for Gim to win this tournament. That's not a great price.
Yeah, it's a reach. You're buying a stock at essentially an all-time high there with Doug Gim, but he's playing unbelievable his last 5 tournaments. Can he keep the run up? We'll have to wait and see this week, but he's been on an incredible run. Was awesome to sort of follow him around the Players a little bit. Had his shining moment on 17 there. So yeah, we'll have to see if he's able to pull through and do it once again.
So we got Cam Young top 20, Doug Gim top 20 for the placement market. Where are you going, Joe, with your gold selection?
You know what? I'm going to stick in the placement market, but I'm going to go top 40, Pat. I'm going to go Adam Hadwin. I know he dropped a 6-iron in the lake at TPC Sawgrass on the 18th hole or whatever club it was. He's going to need to probably get refitted this week, but he had the weekend to do so. He's coming back to the Valspar where he's played good historically. Obviously, he got his sort of maiden PGA Tour victory there. And a bit of a hit or miss up and down season so far for Adam Hadwin. A T4 at the Genesis about a month ago. He played really well at the American Express as well. I just think, Pat, for me, this is a motivation play with Adam Hadwin. President's Cup coming up, obviously in Canada. He has got a ton to play for, and I think that may be where you saw some of that frustration boil over for a player like Hadwin, someone who's probably, to be honest, been rightfully passed up by someone like Nick Taylor that he didn't see coming. There's Connors, there's Hughes, there's Fenson. There are a lot of Canadians vying for spots on a very important President's Cup team this summer. And Adam Hadwin, I think, believes he should be on that team, and he has to start playing really well. And this is a week where he shows back up to a course where he has very positive energy. It was a couple of bad swings last week at Sawgrass and a miscut, and that place can do that to you very quickly. Much more forgiving in a sense off the tee, where you're not going to have to deal with drops and penalty hazards as much. It's more of a true ball striking test. And I think that hopefully he can have a decent approach week and get things going in the right direction. He is even money plus 100 in the top 40 market this week. I like that bet. I'm taking it on my card.
All right, so no negative money, no minus in front of any of these numbers so far for the gold selections. I like it. Once again, get your ass on UnderdogFantasy.com using code Mayo. The Pat Mayo Experience open. Thursday drafts will be launched on the drafts page as soon as the tee times are released for the Valspar Championship. So let's fill that up as quickly as possible to make it bigger. I don't want to say better than rake free. Maybe they'll give us money back on it, add some money into the tournaments. I don't know what Underdog is up to on that front, but it is rake free this week, the Thursday only draft. But what I want to do is hit some Thursday pick'ems with you guys right now and see if we can find some winners. I've come up with 3 for Underdog that I like. And let's narrow this down to 2. So we'll do a group consensus on this one. I had Tony Finau higher than 2.5 bogeys or worse. Brad, what do you make of it?
Well, for my Tony Finau future, I hope it doesn't happen, but it makes total sense, especially when you look at Underdog, you have to look at the numbers. They're projecting him 70, his score is 70, but 5 birdies. So there's got to be at least 2 or 3 bogeys in there. And then Tony, just with his game, he's going to have that clutch putting. This could be a week where he doesn't have the clutch putting that comes with him. Those 5-foot putters, those comebackers. So I kind of like that.
Joe, do you like that one, or do you like Min Woo Lee higher than 70 strokes?
I think I would prefer Min Woo there. Min Woo has seemed so much more volatility. Tony worries me a little bit. I was shocked to see Patty's #1 in strokes gained approach this season. Like, he's really been dialed in with the iron play, which I didn't necessarily expect, at least for guys in this field. I think Min Woo probably goes over par this week. And are we just talking round 1 here?
Yeah, we're just talking round 1.
I'd say Min Woo.
Yeah, see, I like Min Woo as well because, and we'll get to this later on in the show, the magic of editing, that these par 5s aren't gettable. When the par 5s aren't gettable, it's tougher for Min Woo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, that's his bread and butter right there. The other one I want to throw on was Eric Cole lower than 25.35 fantasy points. I think it might be over for Eric Cole for the moment, Brad.
I think it might be too. And I've been clinging on to what was last season, right? Like, we've heard stories of he just needs a break, or he just needs to rest his body. He plays in so many events. I just don't think he's playing good golf, right? Like, he's a guy who I don't think he's like a superstar golfer who has all of these weapons. So he needs to be hitting fairways. He needs to be gaining strokes on approach, and he's just not doing that. So I'm down with it. He's on my fantasy team, and I reached for him this year because he helped me get to the fantasy finals last year, and I'm regretting it. So I hope it doesn't win. I hope he goes way over the fantasy points, but yeah, the dude's game is not in a good spot right now.
Yeah, he's only been over this number in a single round, Joe, in one of his past 10 rounds.
Yeah, he's struggling, and I didn't think he was going to struggle. Like Brad, I picked him on my season-long team this year, just kind of banking on the fact that I knew he was going to make a ton of starts, right? That's probably why we took him, Brad.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, like, I expected him to tear apart Florida. He went off and grew up on the mini tours down here. He was from Orlando. He plays most of his golf in Jupiter, and that just has not happened. He went back to the Cognizant. He had one really bad hole, but in total lost 10 strokes on a approach at PGA National, was decent in sort of a rebound, but did it a lot with the flat stick at the Arnold Palmer, which we know isn't sustainable, and then missed the cut, was 2 over par last week at the Players Championship, lost strokes off the tee, lost strokes on approach. When those two things sort of go, it's really hard to make that up week in and week out with the putter. I think he's just in a little bit of a slump and probably closes out the Florida swing on a low note, as he's done through the first 3 events.
Brad or Joe, I'll throw this to you. Is there any player for the first round that you do like someone like Maverick McNeely, lower than, like, can he shoot 1 under or better?
Man, so tough. I was kind of thinking Taylor Moore, right? Like 1 under or better for Taylor Moore, defending champion. And if, let's say, there's some type of pattern where defending champions just automatically play well their next trip here, why can't Taylor Moore start off hot in round 1?
Joe, I bet Taylor Moore for that exact reason. There's a history of repeat winners, so I'll bet Taylor Moore.
Yeah, I don't mind Taylor Moore at all. If there's one player I'd probably look to play over and higher on, I'm looking to Jordan Spieth. I followed him really closely last week because I was with the McIlroy and Hovland group. something is off with the swing right now. He had sort of the rules thing, and I think that was sort of a symptom of the frustration that has been building up on the course for him at this point. I know he flew yesterday. He's a short prep week, was down in the Bahamas. He's now taken on this additional responsibility of being the voice of the PGA Tour and the policy board in these meetings with the PIF, and all this stuff is sort of going on outside of the golf course that, like we saw with Rory last year, can really affect your play on the course. I know he has a great history here, but he's not playing good golf. Last year, before he finished T3 here, Pat, real quick, he had 4 fantastic weeks on approach before that start when he got T3. His last 4 starts on approach heading into this season have been terrible. The irons are off right now. There's a lot of voices and a lot of things in boardrooms and Zoom calls going on outside the golf course for Jordan Spieth. I would probably look to fade him this week.
Okay, well, how about this one? Because we know that the par fives are difficult relative to par fives at almost every single course on tour, really. Like when you kind of break it down, like, the easiest one is hole number 1. Like that's your chance for an eagle. It's 560 yards. The rest of them like barely play below par. Like the birdie rate is like 32%, 31%, 21% for number 5, 41% for number 1. But like you take a look at the bogey rate. The bogey rate for number 5 is 15%. Like that's outrageously high for a par 5. Number 11 is 10%. What if Jordan's not driving the ball well, and he always has the magic beans to scramble and make these ridiculous birdies, so this is going to look stupid. How about we just do Eric Cole lower than 25.35 fantasy points? And because I'm greedy, we get the 1.1 hot tamale special here on Underdog. For Jordan Spieth, higher than 18.5 cumulative par 5 strokes in round 1. So we can shoot 1 under on the par 5s and we're fine. He just can't get to 2 under, and maybe he can throw a bogey in there. What do you think?
Love it.
Brad?
Oh man.
You don't like it? If you don't like it.
I don't know. I think I have this soft spot for Jordan, and it's the soft spot at this event, right? I'm such a vibes better. Like I like good vibes. Well, last year when I was at Valspar, I accidentally parked in the players' parking lot, and they just like kind of let me go through. And Jordan Spieth was a golfer that I saw, and instead of him just being like, "Dude, what are you doing here?" He's like, "Hey, what's up, man? How's your day going?" And I'm just like, now I just like want to root for him and be like, play better. I almost took him last week at 25-1. His game's in a bad spot, but what he needs to go
2 under.
You can't go better than 1 under.
Yeah. But I mean, but 2 of these holes you can bogey. And Jordan Spieth not afraid to like rope it into the trees.
15%, and we have another like 8% on 2 of them. Yeah, I would take it. I mean, I wouldn't. You get the little chili pepper? Yeah, give me the little chili pepper. Give me a little boost on it.
All right, so that's the official Underdog play. Code Mayo at Underdog. And I'll put this out on Twitter too. You can just click the link. It'll automatically populate this entry if you want to tail along for us. And you get a deposit match of up to $100. It's going to be Eric Cole, lower than 25.35 fantasy points in round 1. Jordan Spieth, higher with the hot tamale, 18.5 cumulative par 5 strokes. 100 pays, $313. Recapping last week of how me, Byron, and Ben Coley did. We got 0 for 3 with the gold, 0 for 3 with the silver, but 3-0 as a part of the bronze. And the bronze was no slouch. Doug Gim, plus 333 for Byron. I had Harmon, top lefty, minus 150. And Ben went with a parlay of Harmon low lefty, minus 150. Parlayed with Griot, low South American, minus 150, which was also a winner. So you basically got your money back. If you bet all 9, you probably broke right around even, which is our worst week of the year so far on the Best Bet show for golf. So, if your worst week is going to be a break-even week, I mean, that's where we really want to be here as we head into the silver selections. I'll kick it off with, maybe I'm just buying a bit too much into this and what he's done at the course, but I actually liked what I saw from Matthew NeSmith, especially on Sunday when things weren't really going right for him. He was able to pull a chip in out of his ass, and it's a good course for him because he hits a ton of fairways. He's very good with his irons, and his game is starting to round back into form just a little bit. Not quite where he was when he finished 3rd at the Valspar a few years ago. He doesn't have that quite high-end ball striking prowess as he did, but we know that it's in there. This field is it's not a weak field by any means, but once you get past the big 10 to 12 guys in the field, everyone's kind of the same. So I went with Matthew NeSmith, plus 240 for a top 30, and that includes the ties. He's played this tournament twice, Joe. He's never finished outside of the top 20. So let's go with the Knights, who say Smith.
The Knights of D. Smith. I was waiting for it. There it is. I actually followed him a good bit because you know me, I stay glued on the course a little bit to my guy Denny McCarthy, and Matt Neesmith was with him and played much better than Denny. And he had his whole family there. It was nice to see him sort of play well. You mentioned off the tee, gained over 3, gained another 2 on approach. The tee to green week was fantastic, and it's a place where was it 2022, Pat? I was just trying to look up that he almost won here and was in the final group. Yeah, T3 in 2022. Had a fantastic week. He was catching a lot of publicity and media that week, talking pretty openly about some changes that he made from sort of a psychological standpoint that had really sort of freed him up that week. And he's played well here the following year as well. So a good week last week to build on. Nice spot here from Matt Neesmith.
Yeah, when you see like in Phoenix, he loses 6 strokes on approach. I think it's the most he's ever lost. And yeah, it is the most he's ever lost on approach in a tournament. So that really, like when you do sort of even short-term modeling, just 2 really bad rounds, if you're looking at the past even 24 or 12 rounds is really going to put a guy down. But when you start taking a look at overall what he's still doing well, like the irons haven't been, like I said, quite as electric as they once were, where he was just gaining like clockwork every single week. It's been a bit more up and down, but then you start to put some context into it. Like, did we really expect him to gain a whole bunch at Torrey Pines? I mean, I didn't. So, big deal on that one. You take a look at the Cognizant. Like, if you finish in the negatives at the Cognizant, that could just be one bad shot where you lost like an entire stroke because you put it in the water and no one else did that day. So I'm hoping that this tee to green is back. Something clicked for him. The irons are back, and obviously he has putted very well on these surfaces over the years. So I'll go with Neesmith. Top 30 is not much of an ass, Matt, so figure it out. Brad, silver pick.
My silver pick, I'm going with the outright winner. And when I say this name, I don't want to hear any scoffs. But I told myself back during API, when we get to TPC, I'm betting Scottie Scheffler to win the Players, right? I went on the PGA Tour's golf bet, and I think all 3 of the panelists were like, Brad, you're crazy. No one's ever won back-to-back. And what do I do as your classic gambler? I get in my own way. Then I said, they're right. I'm not going to bet them. Well, before Mexico, I believe, I said, after Mexico, I said, I'm going to bet Sam Burns to get his 3rd championship at Valspar. And then he goes on to have 2 pretty poor outings at Arnold Palmer and API. And I mean, Arnold Palmer and TPC, but I can actually forgive those outings because at Arnold Palmer, he just straight left the course. He had a really tough Sunday. You could kind of like trick yourself into saying that he was in contention. And then at the Players, he had similar instances where he would card double bogeys, but this is a little bit easier of a test. And like you guys said earlier, this is just a ball striker's course. And if I look on this sheet, look on the odds sheet, there's no ball striker I want more than Sam Burns, at least in the way he's playing right now. The putter's still doing all right. I think he lost at the Players, but like when you're not in contention and you're not really playing all that great, I could just strike through that, especially with a guy of Sam Burns' putting prowess, because he's going to go like 10 events gaining strokes on the putting surface and then loses 1. That's not going to get me off him. So I'm going to stick to my guns here at 12-1, gross number. But I said it like 4 weeks ago that I'm going to bet him, and I'm going to continue with how I should have done with Scottie at the Players.
I bet Sam Burns last week. What a loser.
1 week away. You're 1 week too early.
I've bet him a few times. I bet him in Amex too. And it's funny because he has 6 wins, yet I've never hit any of them. But every time that I do bet on him, he didn't put himself in contention last week, but the majority of the time he puts himself in contention to win. And then when he went into the water on 17 on Sunday at Sawgrass, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what he'd do if he was winning by 3 strokes too. So there's really no change. So it's nice to see that's not just pressure that affects Sam Burns. If there's water to be found, Joe, he's going to find it.
Yeah, he's going to find it if there's a hospitality tent to be found. He's probably going to find that as well. But, Pat, you came on my show a few weeks ago, and we sort of touched on Sam Burns. And, like, he's sort of evolving as a player into much more consistent, I will say. All of his last 10 starts, he's made the cut in. His worst finish within those 10 starts was a T45 at the Players last week. He crept in through the cut line. And I think sometimes I look at Sam Burns and I asked him a question this past week when he stepped up to sort of the media mic there. And I asked him sort of about his aggressiveness. And it seems like he's a player that's always out there hunting birdies. And I think sometimes with Sam Burns, it's like the absence of thought is helpful for him. I was looking at quotes from this course when he won. And they were asking him about the greens, and he's like, I think they're Bermuda, but they might be like for him to not even really know the green surfaces just shows you how he's just going out there to play. And sometimes clouding your mind with too many thoughts on the course can be a bad thing. And Sam Burns is just going out there and playing aggressively round after round, week after week, and he's producing a ton of results. I don't mind the outright pick at all, Brad. I worry a little bit about the fatigue of what last week at the Players may have brung. But you can say that for almost all the guys at the top of the field. I wouldn't have pictured this as a great course fit for Sam Burns right off the bat, but back-to-back wins and then a great finish last year. Is this like the type of course you would have thought, Pat, that is a great fit for someone like Sam Burns?
See, yes, I do, because I feel like when Sam Burns, because
Okay.
we like in our minds, I think when we think about Sam Burns, it's like, oh, this guy is going to hit a bunch of greens in regulation, but he's just going to make all these 25-foot putts. Like that is his path
Right.
to success. But when you take a look at when he's done his best, be it at the Sanderson Farms or the match play here, or even places like Riv or Torrey Pines, where he's had success as well, he basically just goes full go with the driver and he can control it perfectly. Like you can almost tell immediately, like at the beginning of a round, how well is Sam Burns driving it? If he's driving it well, he's going to have a great score that day. And that's how I knew that my player's bet was pooch when he put it into, I don't know, 6 consecutive fairway bunkers at the Players. It's like, well, he's just fucking himself every single time off the tee. And he doesn't, he can, listen, all these guys can have great approach weeks. When we think about Sam Burns, it's not like, oh, he's Colin Morikawa-esque. He's going to gain 12 strokes on approach. That's not really his game. He needs to gain a whole bunch with the driver. He needs to be like, okay with his approach, like gain a stroke or two or like whatever. He doesn't need to be leading the field in that. And then he chips and putts really well. Like his game, weirdly enough, I think would make him live eventually in the right week at a US Open or at a PGA Championship. Now that the PGA Championship has become a little tougher. Whereas I don't see that game translating as well to somewhere like Augusta.
Yeah, he's gonna have that. He's gonna have that round, right, where he's 7 or 8 under par. We know that because of how aggressive he plays, and historically, he's always done that. It's just a matter of those other 3 rounds within the tournament being able to make par when he's out of position, which has proven to be a difficult task for him. But you're right, when he gets it right, he gets it really right. He's got 6 PGA Tour victories and a good major championship season or a final pairing on a Sunday is going to further that confidence and put him right up there and make himself believe that he's one of the top players in the world.
Yeah, because he's what, Brad? Like a fringe top 10 American player, if you don't count the live guys?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think he's like one of the more underrated winners. Like 6 wins on the PGA Tour is like nothing to scoff about. But when you look at betting cards of us handicappers, like the ones that are on Twitter, you don't see his name in there too often, right? But you do see the guys who don't win a lot just consistently on cards. I mean, I would rather pick a winner, a guy with win equity, than most of these, no offense, losers we put on our cards at the similar prices. Like Sam Burns is consistently a 22-1 guy, yet we're picking guys with 2 PGA Tour wins week in and week out at the same price.
I always find Burns is better when no one is on him at any tournament. Like, like how popular was Sam Burns ever, Joe, when he won any of these events and people picked him? Like, that's why I bet him in American Express this year. And I really thought I was going to cash that ticket until, again, he went into the water on the 71st hole. And that was the old end to Sam Burns on that one. But like no one really won. He was like 35-1. It's like, this is a good course for him. He plays Pete Dye courses pretty well. And that was another week where he just dominated with his driver. The one fun thing about Burns, the out that you always have, which is sort of the antithesis of most losers that we do bet on week to week who never win, is he can putt. And that's always a nice out to have sometimes.
He can putt, and he has got balls on the putting green in terms of from 15, 20 feet. You're right. I think back to when he won, and I don't think any of those weeks he was like a 25-1 guy. I know when he won the first Valspar, I was looking back at my old cards and I had him. It was like 80-1 when he
Yep.
sort of broke through. The match play last year, I believe, was a pretty big number as well. He had to take down Scotty in the final round. So yeah, I think that he's another one of those guys, kind of like Cam Young, that fluctuates up and down the board. When he's playing really well, you'll dip and you'll see these 12-1s in a weaker field. But you'll also, like, you're going to be able, if he plays poorly a couple of weeks, you can get him in a major championship at probably 60 or 70-1 if he has a couple of bad weeks. So he really moves up and down the board. And what we've seen is his game is pretty much suited for anywhere. He's won at Birdie Fest. He's won on difficult courses. When he's playing really well, he's a top end talent without a doubt.
The problem is, Brad, for major championships, is Sam Burns has never finished better than 20th in any major championship.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that has to do with like the mentality of it, right? Like he's the type of golfer who always has that that round where you're just like scratching your head, like, Burns, how are you 3 over on the round? You should be just killing it. Maybe a couple balls in the water, maybe a couple balls in the tree. And major championships, if you don't have that, I don't know, the bounce back mentality of I can go from hole to hole in every single hole, not make a ton of mistakes and just keep grinding it out, then you're not going to have that success. And I don't think that's how Sam Burns is. I think Sam Burns goes out, he plays golf, and when his game is going well, it's going well. Not, I just carded a double bogey on the last hole. I need a massive bounce back and to get myself back into the contention or to make the weekend. He doesn't miss a ton of cuts. With his last cut was in a major championship, but I just think that's his mentality. Like maybe it's that, was he Louisiana, just, chilling on an airboat, where there's gators over there. Who cares? I'll stick my foot in. If I get bit by a gator, I get bit by a gator. You can't have that kind of mentality where you're just going with the flow at a major. I think major champions, especially guys who contend at majors, are very calculated, or they're just the best golfer in the world.
Yeah, like it's one thing to say Scotty Scheffler is going to show up and play well. John Rahm is going to show up. It's how do these next level guys really do? And it probably is a lot of it to do with mentality. So, Joe, one more silver pick on the board. It belongs to you. Who is it?
Going to the matchup market, Pat. Tournament 72-hole matchup. Aaron Rai over Christian Bezadenhout. Rai is minus 115 here. It's just, for me, it comes down to, I think that there's going to be an elevated importance to having some accuracy off the tee this week, Pat. The rough played up like to 3.75 inches last year. They raised the rough. They brought it in closer to the greens, making fairways in play a more attainable stat for those who are really good at it. And Aaron Rai is the second best player in the field. Christian Bezadenhout's outside the top 100. When you look at greens in regulation, Aaron Rai is top 10 in the field this week. Christian Bezadenhout is outside the top 100. So he's got these different things really working for him. Bezadenhout has kind of really leaned on the putter, and he's been fantastic on approach, but he's losing strokes nearly every single start off the tee. And this is one of those golf courses that I feel like penalizes that, particularly with the rough up. It damages your ability to have angles into these greens. It lowers your chances of hitting them in regulation, where he can sort of lean on that putter. And I think that Rai just being able to keep it in play in the short grass is going to be advantageous. It's essentially nearly even money right now. Rai is minus 115. I just checked it before the show. It's still sitting at that price. I've been really good on matchups this year, so I had to bring one here, and I'm going to make it my silver play with Aaron Rai.
So I like Rai this week as well. My issue with Rai, as someone who just is kind of a slut for Rai, is that I think that unless it's fescue greens and we're somewhere in the British Isles, he just can't make any putts, like ever make any putts. But against Bez here, I mean, you could have just said, I'm betting against Bez because Cust picked Bez to win. That would be good enough.
That, it was a factor that I really should have brought up, and it's a shame that I didn't, but absolutely that sort of puts it over the edge. If I would have known that, I would have factored that in more. It would have been my gold pick.
So Right now, I ran my Valspar model, which is available on the research show. It's also available for you guys to look at inside of the newsletter with my weightings and everything. And you can go adjust that when you are a Fantasy National member, fantasynational.com/Mayo for 20% off. Get the monthly right now. Take you right through the heritage. So you get the masters in there too. Aaron Rye comes in number 3. Joe, number 1 in good drives gained. And it's not usually a stat that I look at all that often, but I really do think that here, U.S. Open, places where, look, this isn't U.S. Open, USGA rough. You can get it onto the green if you hit it into the rough, but I do like to play with the filter and put the rough on long and average just to see if guys can continue to be up there in good drives gained. And like you kind of pointed out with Rye, he clinches his good drive check mark not through greens and regulation every time. It's through hitting the fairway every time. So he rates out number 1 in that stat. Other guys inside the top 10 right now, Damon, Horschel, Bryce Garnett, who just won, Putnam, Zach Blair, who had a very high-end finish here a year ago. Vic Perez is another one where Bez is down at like 100 in this field.
Yeah, and the thing also with Bez is you look at his numbers and he's gaining so many strokes on approach, but one of the things we know about strokes gained and one of the sort of flaws there, he's gaining so many strokes on approach because he's never in the fairway.
Yes.
But those tournaments where he has 3.7 strokes gained on approach, Pebble Beach, when he's gained 4 strokes at Waste Management Phoenix Open, when he does it at the Cognizant Classic, those are not courses with very penal rough that is going to sort of damage his ability from still getting to that green. And when he's hitting from the rough and he puts it to 25 feet, he's therefore gaining a ton of strokes on approach that way. I don't think this is that type of course. I think the rough is going to be a legitimate hazard this week and prevent him from hitting some of those greens in regulation, which is another reason why I kind of leaned on Rye when I saw those two paired up in a head-to-head.
Joe, I know you're a member at Fantasy National, and anyone who is watching who's a member at Fantasy National, I would recommend getting yourself on that wait list, the banner that's up there at the top right now. The app finally got approved through the Apple Store in testing. So you need an iPhone. I guess, or an iPad, I suppose, but I think it's optimized to iPhone. Did you see any screenshots of the new leaderboard by chance?
Looks incredible. I have it downloaded on my phone. I'm excited to be able to sort of track golfers through it this week and see kind of how it looks and how it functions in real life. But the interface looks awesome. It's super appealing. And you know me, I'm sort of a graphic guy, so I like the way that it looks, and hopefully just to being able to check out the functionality, it looks like a great addition to the Fantasy National sort of network there.
Yeah, Brad, you're going to want to get in on this. Once this app is released fully to the public and not just for Fantasy National members, which it will be for a while as we go through testing and all this, imagine having the ability to open up your phone and track the players that you want, and you don't have to click. I mean, it's faster than the PGA app just because of the deal that we have with ShotLink. I don't know why theirs is so bad, but you don't have to open up a golfer to see what they're doing. It just appears on your screen. Doesn't that sound great?
It sounds amazing. Actually, I went on last night to try to set up myself with the early access, but I was using my computer and I couldn't find my phone. I was like, oh, this is a phone project, but I'm definitely going to make sure I do it today before I head out of town, and it's out of sight, out of mind. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Moose said he's going to start approving people on Thursday morning. He has to wait till the tournament actually starts in order to do that. So be on the lookout if you're on the wait list for Thursday morning, because we got it through. The first round of people got it at the Players' Championship. I saw a few people on the course using it while they were watching it, and they said it was pretty close to real time. So about as close to real time as you're going to get. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly real time. There's probably like a 15-second delay, but it's pretty cool to watch the shot on the main feed on TV. Like you see Scotty Scheffler hit a shot, then like 7 seconds later it updates on the phone without you having to do anything. Yeah. So imagine what guys are doing from all over the course. It's going to be incredible that way. Bronze picks for the Valspar Championship. I was actually going to take Sam Burns' top 20, Brad, at minus 120, just because it seemed very safe to me. But you have him outright, so I am not going to put him on the card. I'm actually going to go way down. I'm going to play a top 40 market. So top 40, Grayson Sigg, plus 170. The best par 3 player in the field right now, which is shocking because the dude cannot make a putt to save his life. But if we think about approach play, he has been excellent. He is number 1 on par 3s from 200 to 225 yards over the past 24 rounds. Top 20 in good drives gained. Top 10 tee to green. Brad, he cannot putt from 5 to 10 feet. However, no one can putt from inside 10 feet at this tournament, so hopefully that equalizes it.
Wait, I was so close to taking Grayson Sig top 20. He modeled out sixth in my primary
Me
model.
too.
And a lot of that obviously has to do with the long par three scoring ability there. But I ended up staying away. And I wish I had some like crazy logic behind it. Maybe volatility. But I feel like when you have these, and this is not a weak field, obviously, but a weaker field event due to the back-to-back Florida swing events that are signature events. You have these guys who are just going to pop, and I feel like Sig has the opportunity to pop. I just can't get over, his form. Right, like the dude just missed so many putts, like loser on the green, loser on the green, loser on the green, and I want guys who can putt when I'm putting like those kind of tickets out. But I mean, if he just has like, I figure if he has like a neutral putting week, right, like gains .1. He's probably the kind of guy who will finish, T28. And then I think that's a very winnable bet. But for a top 20 for me, I just couldn't do it because I needed a little bit more confidence in the flat stick.
Yeah, so top 40 is where I want to go to. Although, it basically he finishes outside the top 40 when he makes the cut, Joe, or he finishes inside the top 20. Those are like his two outcomes when he makes it. But the driving and irons are on point. Just like, can we get lucky with the putter at least once?
Yeah, the ball striking is on point. I know he's like sort of a Georgia, South Carolina guy. The course at Valspar looks like it's dropped somehow. It's like 0.5 miles from the Gulf Coast there. From being there, Brad, it looks like it's been dropped in the middle of the South Carolina somewhere. So it's a very unique feel. A lot of people, and was sort of surprised to hear this, but there were a lot of people sort of in the media center last week that were talking about the comparisons and how it's the most similar that they thought to Augusta National, which kind of caught me a little bit off guard. But Grayson Sig, obviously the ball striking has been fantastic, and a top 40 market is probably the right place to play him right now when you look at the volatility with the putter.
Brad? Bronze pick. Let's end this out. 3 winners for you. And if you get the Sam Burns, that'll be the highest one that's been a winner so far on the Best Bet show.
Well, after Sam Burns wins, we're going to look at the leaderboard and we're going to see Sam Ryder sitting inside the top 20. I bet Sam Ryder top 20. I believe that price was somewhere around, where is it? Plus 300. He's just been a great putter in Florida so far, gaining over 4 or 5 strokes on the putting surface here. And his approach play has been pretty freaking good. So one a guy who's going to be consistent off the tee. His putting's heating up, and he's been okay off the tee. I guess I exaggerated, but we have to have a little hyperbole when we're taking a guy like Sam Ryder to finish inside the top 20. And he's finished top 20 here last year. But I just have to remember the Sam Ryder from 2019 and 2021 was not the same Sam Ryder we see now. I feel like Sam Ryder is one of those guys who's gonna start seeing his name in contention a lot more because of how great he's been on approach and those courses where they're super demanding off the tee. Obviously, he won't be the guy you want, right? Like when you see highlights of Sam Ryder on PGA Tour Live early in the morning, they're generally him doing something crazy out of the thick rough because his ball's going to be all over the place on the course. But I think if he clubs down here, he stays consistent on approach, and the putter remains hot. That's really vital because his stat profile is not great before he got to Florida, but if it remains hot, I feel like at plus 300 is something that was worth a stab.
I can do you one better here. I can get you plus 320 on a Sam Ryder top 20. So There we go. So plus 320 for Sam Ryder to finish inside the top 20. I always like Ryder Joe, but I just felt like coming off the good week. Although he does tend to string together good weeks in a row. Maybe I should be looking at that more. Where are you going with bronze?
Okay, so my bronze pick, I'm going up to the top 20 market. I kind of did this before, Pat, with the Golden Adam Hadwin and just blindly ignored recent form, which is never a great strategy. But I'm going to try to buy low here on Sung J M. I think that he's starting to play better golf. I saw signs at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. There were some signs at the Players Championship, T18, T31, and those two finishes. And I believe he made his like temporary home here for a while in the Tampa Palm Harbor area. I talked to Jason Rowson on the show last night, who sort of confirmed that really likes this course at the Valspar. Has played it twice with two, like a T4 was his best finish. I just think that given the guys at the top of the board, he has an opportunity to sort of buy in early on a player that, a few years ago we would have all considered to be a blue chip stock, right? He could
Mhm.
never miss on approach. It was really bad there through early February. The last two tournaments, it's been much more positive. I know I really love his ability still that he possesses to get up and down around the green here. I think the more difficult that it plays, it should reward his type of really, really long term zoomed out skill set. And he's plus 165 in a top 20 market this week. I think is probably the best value of those guys on the top. And I see him sort of continuing to build and make his way back toward the top of the leaderboard.
I like it. Buy low on Sungjae. That might be the DraftKings play of the week. Just try to lead your team off with him, or try to figure out a way to work Sungjae in, because I would imagine he's not going to be super popular. But I'll discuss that more with Tambo in studio on Wednesday. Outright picks. Brad, do you have anyone else besides Gim and Burns to win the tournament?
This is gross. But I went with Tony Finau to win.
Oh,
And
boy.
God, I freaking hate betting on Tony Finau, but doesn't just feel like the kind of field Tony Finau is gonna win at, right? Like his approach numbers have been pretty solid, and like putting was like the thing. Tony Finau hasn't been putting great, but quietly put together two solid putting outings. Mexico, he was a gainer, and then he gained even more at TPC. I just feel like this is just one of those fields that Tony can win. And when I was thinking about looking at the odds, right, I was looking at like Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, and at the time, I think Brian Harmon, they were priced lower. They still are priced lower than Tony Finau. And I just can't, I mean, I just can't get behind it. I did bet on Brian Harmon at a better price, but I mean, Tony Finau, 28-1, I think is what he's at.
Yeah.
Give me a stab. Give me a stab and a massive disappointment when he's just missing putt after putt. I think you had like a 34% 3-foot putt success rate a couple tournaments ago, about a month ago. So I'm ready to be disappointed.
Yeah, I had Finau in my main DK lineup in the big 250 Joe on Sunday. I was like, all right, Tony's playing all right. The ball striking continues to be good, and he's making a few putts. And I watch him on Sunday. It's like, birdie from 3 feet, miss. Par save from 2 feet, miss. It's like, oh my God. It's funny. We're going to get to the underdog section here in a second. But the only play that I have on so far for Tony is 2 or more higher than 2.5 bogeys or worse on Thursday. He might have like 8 birdies, but he's going to be bogeying. If you put him into any sort of like push him back to the wall where he has to get it up and down or make a 7-footer, it just always feels like it's never going in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of my dilemma at the top of the board. I wanted to look at Tony. I wanted to look at Cameron Young. I feel like they have good odds. Both of them suck from 4 to 10 feet. And that's so important this week in terms of saving par. Their inability to sort of cash in, and they're both ranked in like the bottom, like 124th and 119th in the field this week and putting from that range. I just don't feel confident in an outright ticket when a guy is that poor at cashing in from that range. You look at, even the players who played well last week and someone like Nick Taylor and Xander Schauffele for a while, like they were like never missed from inside 6 feet. And finally, when Wyndham Clark missed one and when Xander missed him, it cost him the tournament. So I would imagine ultimately at some point, that's what ends up biting Tony Finau. That's what ends up biting Cameron Young in the butt. That's what ends up biting Justin Thomas in the butt. And these guys that are trying to really capture that victory and get back on top, you got to make 6-footers.
So I also bet Brian Harmon, Joe. I bet him at 25-1. I've seen that number is down even more. I was hoping it would go back up, but Harmon this week to me, because I bet him last week too, so I was right there with you.
Yep.
And as I mentioned a few times on every show that I've done so far, he is the guy that really should have won that tournament. When you go back and watch the final round, he's the one who gave it away, strangely enough. But this feels like he comes in dead last or he wins this week. Like he might have nothing left in the tank.
Yeah. I had him too. I had it early, like 150 to 1 last week. And when you sort of get that type of CLV that it's never going to come through, and you always knew how it was going to end. But the interesting thing about Brian Harmon that I noticed last week, and I'll put it into play again this week, which is a reason why I took him. He can really hit driver and deploy driver on a ton of holes in which other players, I don't know if they can't, but they don't. Like you watched Xander and Wyndham Clark, and how many times were they taking iron off the tee or like fairway metal because driver brings in too much trouble for them. It does going to do that again at Valspar. You're going to hear that it's a club down course. Well, not necessarily for Brian Harmon because he is so deadly accurate and has that thing on an absolute string right now that Brian Harmon was ripping driver on number 1 last week. He was ripping driver on number 10. Holes where other players will not take driver, he'll pull it out because he's not like going to hit it. He knows he's not going to hit it 330, but if he can hit it 305, all of a sudden Brian Harmon's in a group with Wyndham Clark and he's playing 25 yards closer to the green than Wyndham Clark on 4 or 5 holes that day because he's so accurate with that club and he's only left with 80 yards or 90 yards or 100 yards left into the hole. And we know what a good putter and a good wedge player he is. And I think he can sort of deploy that strategy once again this week and hit driver where other players will not because he knows the dispersion of his miss is so much tighter than these other guys.
The one issue I have with Herman, and this is what actually cost him, it was, I mean, yeah, you can say like the 2 missed putts on 1 and 2 really did cost him, but it's actually the driver that was the issue that I had with him. Yes, he was able to take advantage of 15 because he could hit driver, of 1, like you mentioned, where he could hit driver. But on the holes where driver was necessary, it fucked him. Like he couldn't get it over
16,
the
fucked him.
He couldn't get it.
Yep.
He couldn't get over to the bunkers on 12. Like you got to be able to do that. You need to be able to, if you're going to miss on 16 and put it in the pine straw, well, you need to be down there a little bit farther so you can actually have like a decent shot still into the green and not have to lay back to 160 yards for your third and just turn these easy holes into something that's far more difficult. Like when you don't birdie the 2 easiest holes on the course and everyone you're playing with does, I mean, you don't deserve to win at that point. So, Brad, you've walked around Innisbrook. The par 5s here, they're not super gettable in 2, are they?
No, and I think that's what kind of levels it out for Harmon, right? Like I have this like weird thing betting Brian Harmon. I think I've bet him 3 times. Luckily, I did bet him at the Open, but when it's these courses that you need to dominate, and there's 4 par 5s here, so you need to have great scoring on par 5s, but I mean dominate, like when you need to put some eagles on your card, Brian Harmon's not going to be the guy for you. But here, I think there's some par 5s here that it's okay. You walk away with par. Par's good score. So I'm glad you guys are on Brian Harmon as well, because I didn't know if we were going to get a little bit of missing out fatigue, right? Like he got so close and he's just no shows this week. I thought he was a prime candidate to withdraw from this event. Like you have to think you're one of the long shots in the field and you find yourself in contention on Sunday. Probably should have won. I didn't bet him at the 150, and I missed the number. So I thought I was in shambles. I was in shambles after Wyndham Clark's putt, but we'll see what happens. One thing I do want to add to I think it was what Joe said, like with Brian Harmon, he's also sneaky long for a little guy, right? Like he's not hitting his driver 280 out there. It's still like 290, 295. So it gives him a little bit of advantage when he's able to pull driver at a course like this. He knows he's not going to miss crazy. He's going to have a wedge in, which a wedge in for a guy who's already good with his wedges and a good putter is a pretty dangerous combination.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of historical comps because Joe, this was going around about like what Scheffler's Tiger Woods kind of thing, and then I think it was Kyle Porter put out the data golf rankings of like the best like runs anyone's had in their careers, and VJ's run in 2004, which everyone forgets because Tiger was still so good in 2004. Like VJ won 5 times that year and didn't win Player of the Year, but that's basically who Scheffler is. Scheffler is VJ Singh. He's a guy who's amazing tee to green and can't putt.
Yeah, I worry that he's found something with this mallet that is going to eventually lead him on a run. But this is just how you naturally feel, right? When the number 1 player in the world rattles off 2 back-to-back wins, we're always going to probably overinflate and elevate what we think is going to happen from him career-wise. And we'll forget that he went 52 weeks prior without a victory and looked to be the old like uber frustrated anytime he stood over an 8-foot putt and uncomfortable. So there's ebbs and flows to everything. I think right now is probably not the best time to try and figure out what Scotty Scheffler's career is going to be, because it feels like at this point, how is he not going to win the Masters? How is he not going to win the US Open when he plays like this? We just know it's impossible to sort of sustain that level of play unless you're one of the, have one of the 3 or 4 best seasons of all time in professional golf, which he has a lot of work left to do to get there.
Yeah, the last thing I want to make about Brian Harman, Brad, was I was very impressed with his ability to play into the longer par fours, which you're going to see a lot of this week. Like, his long irons are really good. And he doesn't even really hit a long iron. He hits that weird, like, 5 hybrid or 3 hybrid or whatever the hell it is. And it's a weapon for him on these long par threes, too. Like, he just kind of sticks it to 15 feet every time.
Yeah, he does. And listen, we watched a lot of this golf on TV. I just think it's so cute watching Brian Harman play golf, right? Like, he's this small guy trying to muscle hamster the ball down the fairway. Then he pulls out his little hybrid, gets it on the green, rolls in the crazy putt, crowd goes wild. Like, how can you not root for a story like that? Especially with, you have these built beefy guys bombing off the tee, or you have guys who are just tall in stature like Scotty Scheffler. And when you have a little Brian Harman out there, just plucking along and having success.
That will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience Best Bets. To recap the gold picks for us: Cam Young, top 20, plus 150. The Gim Reaper, top 20, plus 230. Adam Hadwin, Joe, top 40, plus 100. So even money on that front. The silver picks for me: Matthew Neesmith, top 30, plus 240. Sam Burns to win for Brad at 12-1. And then Aaron Rye over Seabez at minus 115 for Joe. Bronze picks: Grayson Sigg at plus 170 for a top 40. Sam Ryder, top 20 at plus 320 for Brad. And Sung J M to get back on the horse, top 20, plus 115 for Joe. That will do it for us. Joe, the Preferred Lines podcast is already out if people want to go check it and sub to that YouTube channel. Did you get over the 1,000 subs yet?
Almost, man. I'm at like 975. I'm hoping this appearance and all of the Mayo Media Network fans out there can bump me over the mark that I've been looking to hit. But yeah, Preferred Lines is out now at Tour Picks, where you can find all my stuff on Twitter. It's been a pleasure, as always, to join you, Pat, and best of luck to you and everyone out there for the Valspar.
Brad, if people are unfamiliar, where can they find all your work? And should I be tailing your EPL bets too?
Absolutely tail my EPL bets. The EPL season's going absolutely insane. It's probably on the verge of being my best season in the last 5 years. I think we'll clear the 80 unit mark as a 1 unit better. So far, with like 7 weeks ago, it's pretty nice. But you can find my work on X at Mr. Brad Thomas, or on the NBCSports.com website. Just go to Premier League, go to golf. We'll have some stuff up for UFC 300 as well. Pat, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, you guys, for doing this early on a Tuesday morning. Let's get some cash at the Valspar Championship, local to both you guys in Florida. So I had to bring on the horses for courses for the Valspar for the final stop in Florida this season. Obviously, you can follow me at the PME if you want to get your hands on that app that I talked about, fantasynational.com/Mayo, to get the 20% off. Underdog Fantasy, code Mayo, and you can probably tail some of our picks. Tail Kenny's picks, because Kenny is absolutely destroying Underdog. He's been on an Underdog for 2 weeks. He's cashed out $12,000. So yeah, follow along Kenny and the Fantasy Golf Degenerates up there as well. That will do it for me. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!